Maybe you're more ready to get to happy hour. Thanks for sticking in for one more session, maybe 1 or 2 more sessions before happy hour. So I like to start out with a little bit of a flex here. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, why did you name your company 2 Mile High Marketing? And from my intro, you heard that I am from Colorado. It's not because my company is a cannabis marketing company. You've probably heard of Denver as the Mile High City. I live in an area called, or outside of Leadville, Colorado. Has anyone heard of Leadville? Few people? Okay, awesome. So that picture on the left is actually the view from just right down the street from my house. And I love to share that because not many people get to see that every day. I was just behind the stage here talking with somebody who happens to be visiting Leadville, Colorado this weekend and is actually staying at the house next door to my house. Like, how crazy is that? All right, so I want to talk about thought leadership and why thought leadership is so essential for agency owners. A couple of stats here I want to share with you to start us off. First of all, 73% of B2B decision makers consider thought leadership a more trustworthy basis for assessing an organization's value and capabilities than any other form of marketing or messaging. So people see thought leaders as trustworthy. They trust people who are putting out their thought leadership and sharing their knowledge. 54% of B2B decision makers are willing to pay higher prices to organizations they view as thought leaders. How many people here are agency owners? Okay, I see a lot of hands. Great. So of those agency owners or maybe biz dev people within your organization, who would like to be charging higher prices? Should see everyone's hands up, right? So those decision makers are willing to pay you more because they see you as that expert. So I already talked a little bit about why thought leadership is essential. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then we're going to talk about the 3 pillars of thought leadership and how to build your personal brand. So I will use those 2 things interchangeably, thought leader and personal brand, or thought leadership and personal brand. And I see those 2 things as very similar. So I want you to think about somebody you know who you feel has a strong personal brand or who is a thought leader in their space. What are some of the words that you associate with thought leadership? Just shout them out. Confidence, I heard. Expert, love it. Speaking truth to power. That was a strong one. I love it. Trustworthy. Awesome. Okay, so all of those are great words, right? What are those things that we associate with a strong personal brand, with a thought leader? Visibility, credibility, trust. We talked about that. Authority, speaking, innovation, all of these things that we associate with those people who are out there building their thought leadership presence. I want to tell you a story about John. So John Scott is an accountant. He works in an accounting firm. He's a virtual CFO. He came to me and he was like, I want to be the person to bring virtual CFO services to law firms. John is he's an accountant. He's been in the firm that he works for. He's worked there for 30 years, or he had at this time. And he wanted to leave behind a legacy in the company that he had spent an entire career working in. He knew that he had to retire at 65. That was just part of the partners have to retire at 65. So he had 5 years left, and he was like, I really want to do this. I have law firm clients. I know the industry. I am a virtual CFO. I know, obviously know accounting, right? And so he wanted to be seen as that expert. He already was the expert, but he wanted to be seen as that and to help his company kind of grow that new area within the firm. So I came up with a plan for John and started out by helping him optimize his LinkedIn profile. We started getting him speaking events. We started getting him, going to networking events. Developing some content that was thought leadership type content on LinkedIn, podcast interviews, and we even helped him write a book. So all of those things were starting to help John be seen as that expert. After about a year and a half of working with John, he came to me and he was like, I just went to this event and people were coming up to me saying, you're the guy with the book. Like, they were starting to recognize him because we were strategically positioning him as that expert. So I want to talk about the 3 pillars of thought leadership. So anyone who is wanting to develop their thought leadership platform, these are the 3 things to focus on, and what we did for John and what any thought leader should be thinking about in how they're positioning themselves. So the first one is visibility. You got to get visible in front of your target audience, right? You have to be seen. And for a lot of people here, that might look like the content that you're putting out there. Maybe you're blogging on a regular basis. It's that content. You might be doing SEO research, using SEO to reach your target audience, right? There's a lot of ways that you can get visible, and a lot of that is in repurposing some of that content and not just putting something out there one time, but utilizing it in other ways. These are some of the content, some of the ways that you can use content to get visible in front of your target audience. So speaking events, you can see I have a photo of myself at a speaking event recently. Obviously, that's a great way to get in front of your target audience. There's also case studies. So I've got a case study there. I've got a LinkedIn, the one in the middle there is a LinkedIn piece that came from a blog post. So a blog post that we turned into a carousel post, taking some piece of content and turning it into something that is digestible, that people want to scroll through and learn more. Podcast interviews and clips from podcast interviews and thought leadership type infographics and things like that. One of the biggest mistakes that I think people make is they put out a piece of content one time, and that's it, right? Maybe you post a blog post, you publish a blog post, and you maybe share it on social media, and that's it. But there are so many different ways that you can repurpose your content and maximize the visibility of those pieces. So I'm gonna walk through this repurposing kind of framework. But I'm gonna switch a couple of them because I think probably a lot of people here are blogging. So let's say that top item there, instead of podcast, we've got a blog post. So you take a blog post that you put time into, right? You publish that blog post. I've got an example of one. A few years ago, I did a post, 19 ways to market your book on TikTok. Just totally something I was interested in, and I just wrote it for fun, right? But that post started organically bringing in a ton of traffic to my website, surprisingly to me. People were really interested in this topic at the time. So that post I then took and I turned into a lead magnet. So not just the post itself, but I kind of expanded on it and turned it into a guide to marketing your book on TikTok. Then, if I wanted to, I could take that and I could turn it into maybe a topic that I kind of practice by getting podcast interviews and kind of making that my topic that I want to talk about on those podcasts and turning that into, I kind of like to use podcasts as a way of like refining my message and talking through it and hearing what questions people are asking me and using that to determine like other pieces of content I can create, right? Like, so using that as feedback. I could turn it into a presentation, so I can turn it into a 30-minute talk that I want to give. I can write a book. I can expand that. I haven't done that yet, but I could expand that into longer content that would help people. A webinar, so I could do a webinar on kind of the same idea, that practicing that topic, but also I could link back to the blog post in the webinar. Share it in my newsletter, and then all those social media, different types of social media posts that I can create, a carousel post, an infographic. I'm going to show some examples of these kinds of things. But those are all the ways I can take one piece of content and turn it into all of these other pieces of content that help me increase that visibility. I have an example here. I don't know if my client, Miki, is in the room here, but I know she is speaking. There she is. I know she is speaking tomorrow, so a shout out to Miki. I'm using you as an example, Miki. Hope that's okay. So I've got a more tangible example here of taking a podcast video. So Miki has Boozy Browsing. That is a podcast that she does on a YouTube channel. For every episode of that, we can turn that into video clips that can be used. Any podcast episode can be turned into, dozens of clips, but you can make a handful of clips that you can share on social media. I often will take a podcast episode and turn it into 1 or 2 blog posts or articles. So just a story that I'm telling, or a question I'm answering, or something I can turn into another piece of content. And then an article that can be used on other sites, which will help increase the links back to my website, or to Miki's in this example. Pillar number 2 is credibility. So it's not just about getting visible in front of your target audience, but it's also about how you show up. So I like to think of it like, I didn't show up here today in my pajamas for a reason, right? Because I want you to see me as a credible expert in what I'm talking about. If I'm not showing up in that way, that's not how you're going to see me, right? I want to position myself as that expert. And that's how, as an agency owner, you want to be always thinking about that credibility, that you are, how people are perceiving you in what you're putting out there. I started my career in the publishing industry, and everyone knows the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, right? And we used to tell authors that that is the worst advice for authors. Everyone judges a book by its cover. I see somebody nodding. You must be a reader. So everyone judges a book by its cover, and typically people, I think the stat is something like, within 7 seconds, people decide whether or not they're going to read a book. So I just wanted to show an example here of habit building. So here's a couple of books that are on a similar topic, right? Habit building, how to build, and then the subtitle is it's like a continued thought of the title there. Or who's heard of Atomic Habits? Has anyone, read it? Yeah. So those 2 books, maybe I should have asked this question first. I should have done like a swipe left, swipe right on these 2. Like, would you read this one? Has anyone heard of Habit Building, How to Build, blah, 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 blah? Okay. So a perfect example here of people are judging a book by its cover, right? I mean, the content may or may not be fairly similar in nature, but it's how it's presented. And you, as an agency owner, are the cover of your book. You are what people are making a determination if they want to work with you, if they want to use your services. Some types of content that help build authority I have here are thought pieces. So I have an example here. Obviously, you can't read it very well, but it's a long-form piece on LinkedIn. Those perform very well. So wanted to share, this is something I might take a story of working with a client success story, something that I can turn into a content piece that's teaching something that I learned from that. And I'll get into some examples of that later. Or I can take a story of something that happened in my personal life that I can translate to business. Those types of posts, I'm sharing information that's helpful to people, that's engaging, and that it's teaching something. Case studies are great for building credibility, showing something that you did with a client, how you helped them, and people can translate that into how you might be able to help them in that situation. Testimonials. So this is another one of my favorite stories. So Dawn is one of my clients. She took my course. I have a course on how to write a book in 12 weeks. And she took that course and wrote that book that she's holding in that image. And she became one of my biggest fans after going through that. We got very connected during the process. And of course, then I asked her for a testimonial that I could then share. So those are Dawn's words, Dawn's picture holding her book, but showing how I was able to help her bring that to life. And then books, speaking of books, having that book, I was just talking with somebody backstage saying how having a book in hand is just a really, really great way to establish your authority, your credibility as an agency owner. Pillar number 3 is consistency. And I worked with a client a few years ago who said this all the time, and I think there is no truer statement about marketing than this. 80% of marketing is simply reminding people that you exist. So right now, you might meet somebody here today, right, that is not, actually, I'm going to use the example of the book that I was talking about, the blog post that I wrote, 19 ways to promote your book on TikTok. So somebody might have seen that post, and they were in the process of thinking about writing a book, right? But they didn't have that book in hand. So they might have thought, oh, that's something that's really helpful, and that's going to help me someday when I have this book. But 18 months later, when they have that book in hand, they're probably not going to remember that post that they saw in the past, right? But when you're consistently showing up in different ways and sharing your thought leadership with the world, people are going to remember you when they need it the most. I have some recommendations when it comes to consistency. So if you want to show up consistently to establish your thought leadership, these are what I recommend. Posting to LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week, guesting on podcasts 2 to 3 times a month, publishing a blog post at least monthly, and speaking at least quarterly. If you're looking at that and you're like, what in the world, who has time to do that? I say something is better than nothing, so start where you are. So if you can commit to posting to LinkedIn once a week, start with that, right? This is what I recommend building up to if you want to really create a thought leadership platform that is that you're showing up and you're consistent and people are seeing you. This is the way to do it. But if you can only commit to, 1 podcast a month, then start with that. Don't let the list overwhelm you. Start where you are. Okay, I should have had a disclaimer on the rest of this, right? So I should have had a cover here saying buckle up, because I've got a bunch of tools and resources for you. So if you are somebody who is looking to increase your podcast guesting, these are some resources for you that you could try. So some of these will help you on either side of that. So if you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you are wanting to guest on other people's podcasts, they can help in both of those ways. I had podcast guests reach out to me, so I'll read through this list here. So we've got podcast guests, Matchmaker FM, Guestio, Podchaser, Podmatch, and Listen Notes. Podcast guests reached out to me a few months ago and asked, I have my own podcast, and they asked me if they could put me in their newsletter that went out to their subscribers. And I said, sure. You want to share that for free? Go ahead. I had 80 applications of people wanting to be on my podcast in one day. And I selected 25 of those 80 people, recorded most of those already by now, and I've already got all of my podcasts scheduled out through February-ish of next year. So that was a great resource for me. Podmatch is my other favorite on this list. I was at the Podcast Movement conference last week and met Alex, the founder of Podmatch, and he's a great guy, and Podmatch itself is a great service. So if you have a podcast or you're looking to guest on podcasts, that's definitely one I recommend. For finding speaking events, there's Sessionize, Speakers Bureau, joining your local Speakers Bureau or National Speakers Bureau, Speaker Hub, callforspeakers.net, Quoted, and the Speaker Lab. These are all resources where you can type in a keyword, you can type in, the industry, locations. If you're not wanting to travel far, but you're looking for local events, things like that, you can use these to find events that make the most sense for you to guest on, or to be a speaker at, not to guest on. All right, so if you are looking to build up your LinkedIn content, I've got 3 simple frameworks I'm going to share. I'm going to walk through these with you. You're welcome to take photos of the slides, but also after these 3, I'm going to give you a QR code that will share these 3 and 2 additional content frameworks, so you can wait till that as well. It's not gated, so you can just download it. Okay, so content framework number 1. I used to believe, then I realized, now I help others. I have examples here, so I'm going to read these to you, but typically I would make these a lot longer, but for your sake today, I just made them short little examples so you get the idea, right? So I used to believe that if I just did great work, opportunities would find me. But visibility doesn't happen by accident. It takes strategy and consistency. That's why I work with founders who want to build their brand without spending all day on LinkedIn. Content framework number 2 is the problem insight advice. Here's a challenge, here's what we realized, and here's what we did. So an example, one of my clients wanted to land more speaking gigs, but wasn't hearing back after sending pitches. We took a closer look and realized her message wasn't clearly tied to her audience's pain points. A few tweaks later, booked. Visibility works when it's strategic. So again, short sample there, but taking something where we experienced this challenge, here's what we realized, here's what we did, helping people see your thought process, how you're able to help people with this similar challenge. And then content framework number 3, the behind the scenes lesson, what you're working on, a challenge or insight, and a takeaway. Example, we're finalizing details for our fall winter retreat in Colorado, and one thing keeps coming up. Women are craving space to think, write, and reconnect with their message. Creating that space is part of the work I love most because that clarity changes everything. So these 3 I like to have these frameworks just somewhere where when I'm in that space where I'm creating content, I'm thinking about posting on LinkedIn, even if you want to use these to create a blog post, for example, it gives you some ideas to start, just start sparking those ideas, right? So just try to get your brain thinking about what could I post? Like, I use that during that brainstorming time and just helping kind of create those content pieces from examples going on in my work every day. Here's that the QR code with the 5. So there's 5 total frameworks, the 3 I covered and a couple additional. Like I said, it's not gated, so you can access that, download it. So all of these things I talked about, when you learn how to repurpose that content, you start building this flywheel for your content, right? So you are going out and speaking. For example, I'm here today. I posted about this on my LinkedIn 2 weeks ago. I posted again today. I'll post another one later this week. So I'm sharing that on LinkedIn. I'm promoting what I'm doing. I'm going out and doing podcasts and turning that into clips that I can share. And it creates, if you're the kind of person who's like, I don't know what I would post, it helps you just, start putting that into motion. And the more you start, it's like a muscle. So the more you start creating that content, the more you start thinking of ideas, and it kind of just starts feeding itself from there. When I started my business last year, I had a conversation with a professional connection that I had. And he said to me, at this time, he said, you probably don't really know what you want to do yet. And I was like, no, I know exactly what I want to do. And he said, what? And so I explained to him that what I wanted to do was to work with thought leaders like John. I shared that story about John. I wanted to do more of that. I wanted to take my skills and my experience and what I enjoyed, and I wanted to help people in that way, right? And I think that tapping into that and understanding that is what helped me grow my business really quickly. I think that is something that, I talk with people all the time. We're like, I don't know what I would write a book about, or I don't know what I should talk about on social media, right? And I think that it's really important to tap into this authority X factor, and that's what I like to call it. So I want you to take a couple of minutes and think about what makes you different. Why should somebody hire you versus one of your competitors or somebody else who's out there doing similar work? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? What do you enjoy? I want you to think about that and write that down. That is where your content, the content that you're producing, the way that you're showing up online, that is where you're really going to start standing out. And when we're done here, I'd love it if you would tell somebody around you what your authority X factor is, and tell me, if you see me in the hall today or tomorrow, stop me and tell me what your authority X factor is. I think the more clear you get about that, the more clear you get about what that content is that you should be putting out there and how you present yourself, how you position yourself. While you're thinking about yours, I'll read you mine. So my authority X factor is helping people take the expertise they know but haven't figured out how to share with the world and turn it into a visibility platform that builds real traction. I blend strategy with storytelling that connects so my clients can show up like thought leaders without feeling like they're selling themselves. You don't have to have yours quite as clear like today as you're writing this down, but be thinking about what makes you different and what makes you stand out, and why people should work with you. Now, if you are the kind of person who is ready to start really building your thought leadership platform, you're thinking about like, I really want to take this next step, I have this quiz. It takes 3 minutes, and it will ask you some questions that will help you. For one, it's going to tell you where you fall as a thought leader, and then it's going to make you think about some of the things that you can work on if you want to really start establishing that platform. I'm going to go to the next slide. If everyone's done grabbing that, I see someone grabbing it. All right. Whoops, there we go, Q&A. So I'd love to open it up for questions. If anyone has questions about your building your thought leadership platform, your personal brand.
Hi, how do you go about thought leadership if you're not the agency owner or the face of the brand?
So I love this question because I feel this very deeply because I mentioned that I started my company last year. I had been building my personal brand for 15 years. So, and that's where I think at any stage in your career, it's important to be thinking about your personal brand and how people are perceiving you, right? So early on, I mentioned that I was in publishing. So a lot of my personal brand was around book marketing, publishing, writing, things like that. It was things that I was interested in, excited about, passionate about, that I was just developing content because I enjoyed it, right? Like I wasn't doing it on purpose necessarily, but you're being intentional. And I think so going back to the authority X factor, I think for you, it's really important to tap into those things. Like, what is it that lights you up, that makes you different, right? And start developing content around that. I was doing that for years before I ever got anything out of it. I wasn't doing it to get clients. I wasn't doing it to, there was no other reason other than just I enjoyed doing it. But I believe that a lot of that led to kind of the next phase of my career and then the next phase, which was starting my business. So I think it's really about kind of tapping into like what are, you thinking about what makes you excited and what you want to be known for. And sorry, one more thing. I also would think about like, what are those things you want to be known for, and just start developing that content. So whether it's blogging, LinkedIn posts, starting to put those things out there, even in ways that maybe feel uncomfortable to you right now at this stage, but start doing it and you get more comfortable with it over time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm curious, when you're talking about, I'm going to use the word recycling because we're in Portland, recycling your content to these other places, how you're coming up with additional visuals so it doesn't look like the same 3 photos are posted in a carousel and then posted to LinkedIn and whatnot. Obviously, if it's something that's very based in numbers, you can use visuals for that, but I'm curious how you go about that brainstorming for coming up with additional visuals because social media is so visually oriented.
Yeah.
And I'm going to step out of the light. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question as well. I try to change it up in different ways. So I might do, let's say, for example, I do a podcast interview. I can share that in text with a link, with the thumbnail of the episode. I can then take a clip of it. I can turn that into a branded clip. I can do just a static image. I try to come up with different ways. So, I mentioned having those, like, maybe those things you want to be known for, like that list of things that you're going to produce content on. I think it's also helpful to have kind of a list. So like when you're in that mode of I'm going to sit down and work on content right now, to have kind of a list of those 2 things. So what types of content or what different formats can I put together, right? Because I think a lot of times we kind of get in a rut. And not everyone, but I'm not the most creative person. I have creative people on my team for a reason. So I can be the kind of person who will just like do the same thing over and over again. But if I have kind of a list of ideas that get me thinking outside of my normal kind of flow, that helps me too. So just, kind of forcing yourself to think about different ways to create that content and make it different and engaging. Yeah, go for it. Oh, go ahead.
Can you put the QR code back up there for the 5?
Yes. Maybe. There we go. No, not that one. You want the 5, that one? 5 content frameworks?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you share how you got into speaking engagements, and also any tips for anyone that's actually trying to get into it? Because it seems a little daunting.
Tell me about it. I get it. Yeah, actually, so again, I was having some great conversations backstage, and I was just talking with somebody who, we started connecting the dots and realized he knows my former boss. So for me, what I had done, I started my career in publishing, and then I was a director of marketing for 7 years. And in that role, I worked for a person who part of what I was doing is helping him build his thought leadership platform. So that, for him, involved getting podcast interviews, getting speaking events, and I saw the power of that. I saw how much that was helping him grow his company, that he was getting out there. I 100% agree with you that it can be daunting, right? But for me, what I started doing when I decided to start doing this myself was I started doing as much video content as I could to force myself to get comfortable with that, because it's also hard to talk to yourself on a screen and to put out something that is coherent to people, that teaches them something, right? So I just forced myself to do it all the time. And I would post videos on LinkedIn. I would post videos to TikTok, a little bit to my Instagram. I was just getting that content out there. And I started getting better at it. And I started getting more engagement because I just was practicing that. And then that helped me start putting together a message to be able to go and speak on those topics.
Goodness, that is something. So when I saw the way the session's advertised, it's for agencies, and there's a difference between developing your personal brand and if you're an agency, a lot of people start out solo and they're great, but then they bring other people on
Yeah.
who may not be as great or as inspired. How do you distinguish between your product or company brand and your personal self? Because some people are serial entrepreneurs and they move on. They want to leave a credible, authoritative brand behind, as opposed to there's Jim, what's he doing this week?
Yeah. So can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Yes.
So are you asking, like, for that serial entrepreneur who might leave and the personal brand doesn't go with them? Or are you asking, like, more from how do you go from a personal brand to a...
To a company, let's say for your agency, let's say I call my agency, Bob's Website Repair.
Yeah.
Well, not Bob's, because if I move on, I don't necessarily, and then they run it into the dirt, then there goes my credibility. So I might call it something like Spectacular Website Repair.
Yeah.
How do I cement Spectacular Website Repair as a brand with credibility and authority for that agency?
Yeah.
Even if I might not be there later.
Forever. Yeah. Yeah. So great question. I mentioned that I had my personal brand and before I started my business, and I think my personal brand was the key to growing my business. But I also, you use that name example. I also was very intentional about the fact that I didn't want my company to be kellyshuknak.com. Like so I started my company, 2 Mile High Marketing. I showed you that, right? It's still tied to me sentimentally, but I didn't want it to just be my name. I knew I wanted to have a company where I had people working for me who are serving the clients, and it's not about me, right? So I think that was the first thing I did was I made sure that I established a different brand, that it wasn't just my personal brand. And then I think from there it gets tricky, right? Because the reality is it's me selling the services. It's me putting things out there and bringing people in. And as an agency owner, you probably know people are buying you, right? Like that's what they're buying. So it's tricky, but I think that it's having that intentionality around establishing that brand, and maybe at some point you start having somebody else do the sales for your company. You start growing it in that way where but you're being intentional that it's not about you, it's about the entity that you're creating.
This really is bright. I love public speaking. I've spoken at more than 40 WordCamps, but not outside WordCamps. And so, like when I want to speak at a WordCamp, I pay a couple $1,000s for hotel and flight. If I wanted to get into speaking outside WordCamps, am I still looking at that? Like, what am I signing up for if I say, I want to be a public speaker? Is that expensive? Is it?
Can I ask you some follow-up questions on that?
Yeah.
So are you wanting to speak at other events where you're still getting clients from those, or are you wanting to build a public speaking platform where you're getting paid to speak?
Both.
Okay. So I think it sounds like you've done a lot of speaking, so that's great. You have a good start on that, right? Because part of it is starting to build up that that reputation and that present. Like people can look you up and see that you've spoken, right?
Sure.
When we apply for speaking events for our clients, sometimes they ask for a video of you actually speaking, or they'll ask for things like that. Like so, you have that, right? So that part's great. When it comes to getting paid events versus I like to think of it, there's like 3 different ranges of things, right? There's the ones that, like, I can get you a speaking event tomorrow if you're willing to sponsor it for $25,000, right? Like, and some of my clients are like,
I'm not.
Yeah, like, that's not gonna happen. But there are those, right? So you can pay a bunch of money and you can get there and speak. There are the ones that kind of are in the middle, where it's like they might pay for your transportation, your hotel, that kind of thing, maybe a stipend or something, but they're not probably going to pay for you to be there. But the benefit is going out and getting clients from those events, right? And then there's the other side of it, and I have some clients in this area where they're looking to get on stages where they are getting paid for that. So there's all those ranges, and then it's really about finding the right events for you, the right events for, you might be able to find some paid, some in that middle range where you're kind of getting both. It's either one is a win, right? But some might be more of an investment up front. I feel like I'm not answering your question though. What part of that, like how to get to that?
Yeah, I guess my question is, what am I signing up for? Like, what am I committing to? If I say, I want to be a speaker, can I just, how likely is it that I can speak somewhere without paying something? Like, I may not need to get paid, but I can't afford to just fly all over the country and.
Right. So so now I get it. So there has to be a benefit, right?
Yeah.
Like there has to be a benefit, whether it is, like you're not a hobbyist speaker, like I just want to do this for fun and I'll pay whatever. No, you want to what's the benefit, right? So if you're going out and speaking and you're getting clients from it, or you're maybe putting out content after the event and you're getting clients from that, I mean, that would be a win for you. And then also the getting paid for events would be great as well. And I think you can get paid for events. It's harder to get to that point, but doing more of that middle part, like that part is doable, and not a huge investment, but you have to have that payoff for it, right? As an agency owner specifically, like you want to get something back for that. So I think it's, if you're wanting to do more speaking, it's, again, like going back to your authority X factor, but in this case, like really understanding what is that purpose, what am I going to get from this? And if it is just because it's fun and you enjoy it, good for you, love you for that, but in most cases, you want to get something out of it in the end, right? And so, just being clear about that up front, so you know when you're applying for events, like if you hear back from one and they're like, yeah, you can do this for, $10,000, that's not going to be the right fit for you, and knowing which events make sense for you to go to.
All right, thank you.
The investment, one last thing on that. The investment for you then also will be just that time involved in searching for those events, reaching out to those events, the heartache of getting a no here and there, that kind of thing. But hopefully you get more yeses than nos.
All right, thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for standing on stage and sharing all of this with us. This is really cool. My question is basically about when you're thinking about becoming an authority and your marketing message, it can seem repetitive. Can you speak to that? Like how far and how long can you go saying the same thing over on every podcast?
Oh yeah, I hear you. So are you saying from experience, like you've done that and it's felt monotonous, or you think it would be if you were to do that?
I think it will be when I do that.
I think it can be, but I think it's like with going to any event. You go to a networking event and there's parts of it that are the same thing over and over, right? But you're meeting new people, you're engaging in different ways, you're getting different questions. That to me, so I do a lot of podcast interviews and I talk about the story that these stories that I've shared with you. And yes, I can feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but also what's interesting to me is the host, depending on who they are, what they're interested in and what their audience wants to hear, they're going to be asking me different questions. And I feel like the conversations can go in different directions based on what they're interested in. So yes, it can be that way, but I also think, I feel like it stays interesting enough for me. The other thing though is if you're going out and speaking on topics, I think it's beneficial for you to come up with like new ways to talk about the same things, right? Like, so changing up, I've got the 3 pillars of thought leadership, right? Maybe next time I talk about, 5 ways to do blah, 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 right? Similar in nature to the topic and what I'm covering, but changing it up for myself so that I don't start hating what I'm talking about, right? I'm making it fresh and new. Plus, if you have people who are seeing you more than once, that's helping them learn new things from you also. I don't know, does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So regarding social media, the numbers there, what other KPIs that are not part of social media could help me to position as a leader on my industry?
Let me ask you that back. So you're saying KPIs that you can measure other than social media to basically gauge where you are as a thought leader? Is that kind of what?
Yeah.
Okay. So there should be a few things, right? So there should be, if you're blogging, your website traffic would be a good one. You know, I mentioned that 19 ways to promote your book on TikTok. That post, I mean, it was crazy how much traffic I was getting from that. So that to me was like, oh, like right there, I can see that I'm helping people, you know, so the social media numbers are great. But I look at KPIs like, you know, the list that I shared of these are the things to be doing. So LinkedIn, I mean, that's a social media thing, but for me, the KPI is making sure that that post is happening every couple of weeks, and then I can look at the engagement, right? The blog post, like I said, so I can see my website traffic. The events that I'm going and speaking at, so I should be able to see from that how many people I'm connecting with at the event, how many people are following up with me after, you know, how many turn into clients, you know, those kinds of things. So like all of that, those are ways you can measure. Sometimes it's a little fuzzy, right? I mean, we're all in marketing in some way. So like it can be fuzzy sometimes. But I think you start to see that momentum and you can see what, you know, what is adding up over time.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know there's one more question. We are at time. You guys are welcome to hang around and I'm sure chat with Kelly, but just want to give you a big round of applause for this great presentation.